Good morning and welcome back to Today in African History with Baba Shaka. I'm Baba Shaka and today is January 9th, 2021. Today is the anniversary of the date that we lost one of our very important and significant ancestors. Okay? Poet, writer, teacher, and political activist Amiri Baraka was born Everett Leroy Jones in 1934 in Newark, New Jersey. He attended Rutgers University and Howard University, HU. Yeah, you know. Spent 3 years in the U.S. Air Force and returned to New York City to attend Columbia University and the New School for Social Research. Baraka was well known for his strident social criticism, often writing in an incendiary style that made it difficult for some audiences and critics to respond with objectivity to his works. Throughout most of his career, his method in poetry, drama, fiction, and essays was confrontational, calculated to shock and awaken the audience to the political concerns of black Americans. For decades, Baraka was one of the most prominent voices in the world of American literature. Baraka's own political stance changed several times, thus dividing his oeuvre into periods. As a member of the avant garde during the 1950s, Baraka, writing as Leroy Jones, was associated with the beat poets like Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac. In the 1960s, he moved to Harlem and became a black nationalist. In the 1970s, he was involved in third world liberation movements and identified as a Marxist. More recently, Baraka was accused of anti Semitism for his poem, Somebody Blow Up America, written in response to the September 11 attacks. Baraka incited controversy throughout his career. He was praised for speaking out against oppression as well as accused of fostering hate. Critical opinion has been sharply divided between those who agree with dissent contributor Stanley Kaufman that Baraka's race and political moment have created his celebrity, and those who feel that Baraka stands among the most important writers of the 20th century. In the American Book Review, Arnold Rampersad counted Baraka with Phyllis Wheatley, Frederick Douglass, Paul Laurence Dunbar, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Richard Wright, and Ralph Ellison as one of the eight figures who have significantly affected the course of African American literary culture. Baraka did not always identify with radical politics, nor did his writing always court controversy. During the 1950s, Baraka lived in Greenwich Village, befriending beat poets Allen Ginsberg, Frank O'Hara, and Gilbert Sorrentino. The white avant-garde, primarily Ginsberg, O'Hara, and the leader of the Black Mountain Poets, Charles Olson, and Baraka believed in poetry as a process of discovery rather than as an exercise in fulfilling traditional expectations. Baraka, like the projectivist poets, believed that a poem's form should follow the shape determined by the poet's own breadth and intensity of feeling. In 1958, Baraka founded Eugen Magazine and Totem Press, important forums for new verse. He was married to his co-editor, Hetty Cohen, from 1960 to 1965. His first play, A Good Girl is Hard to Find, was produced at Sterling House in Montclair, New Jersey that same year. Preface to a 20-volume suicide note, Baraka's first published collection of poems appeared in 1961. M. L. Rosenthal wrote in the New Poets, American and British Poetry Since World War II, that these poems show Baraka's natural gift for quick, vivid imagery and spontaneous humor. Rosenthal also praised the sardonic or serious or slangily knowledgeable passages that fill the early poems. While the cadence of blues and many allusions to black culture are found in the poem, the subject of blackness does not predominate. Throughout, rather, the poet shows his integrated bohemian social roots. The book's last line is, You are, as any other sad man here, American. With the rise of the civil rights movement, Baraka's work took on a more militant tone. His trip to Cuba in 1959 marked an important turning point in his life. His, his view of his role as a writer, the purpose of art, and the degree to which ethnic awareness deserves to be his subject changed dramatically. In Cuba, he met writers and artists from third world countries whose political concerns included the fight against poverty, famine, and oppressive governments. In Home, Social Essays, published in 1966, Baraka explained how he tried to defend himself against their accusations of self indulgence and was further challenged by Jaime Shelley, a Mexican poet who said, "In that ugliness you live in, you want to cultivate your soul? Well, we've got millions of starving people to feed, and that moves me enough to make poems out of." Soon Baraka began to identify with third world writers and to write poems and plays with strong political messages. Dutchman, a play of entrapment in which a white woman and a middle class black man both expressed their murderous hatred on a subway, was first performed off Broadway in 1964. While other dramatists of the time were wedded to naturalism, Baraka used symbolism and other experimental techniques to enhance the play's emotional impact. The play established Baraka's reputation as a playwright and has often been anthologized and performed. It won the Village Voice Obie Award in 1964 and was later made into a film. The plays and poems following Dutchman express Baraka's increasing disappointment with white America and his growing need to separate from it. Critics observed that as Baraka's poems became more politically intense, they left behind some of the flawless techniques of his earlier poems. Richard Howard wrote in of the Dead Lecturer, 1964, in The Nation, "These are the agonized poems of a man writing to save his skin, or at least to settle in it, and so urgent is their purpose that not one of them can trouble to be perfect." Again, these people are always trying to tell us how we should write, how we should express ourselves, how we should protest. Fiddle faddle. To make a clean break with the beat influence, Baraka turned to writing fiction in the mid 1960s, penning The System of Dante's Hell in 1965, a novel, and Tales in 1967, a collection of short stories. The stories are fugitive narratives that describe the harried flight of an intensely self-conscious Afro-American artist slash intellectual from neo-slavery of blinding, neutralizing whiteness, where the area of struggle is basically within the mind. Robert Elliott Fox wrote in Conscientious Sorcerers, the black postmodernist fiction of Leroy Jones, Ishmael Reed, and Samuel R. Delany. The role of violent action in achieving political change is more prominent in these stories, as is the role of music in Black life. In addition to his poems, novels, and politically charged essays, Baraka is a noted writer of music criticism. His classic history, Blues People, Negro Music in White America, published in 1963, traces black music from slavery to contemporary jazz. Finding indigenous black art forms was important to Baraka in the 60s as he was searching for a more authentic voice for his own poetry. Baraka became known as an articulate jazz critic and a perceptive observer of social change. As Clyde Taylor stated in Amiri Baraka, The Kaleidoscopic Torch, the connection he nailed down between the many faces of black music, the sociological sets that nurtured them, and their symbolic evolutions through socioeconomic change in Blues People is his most durable conception, as well as probably the most indispensable thing said about black music. Baraka also published the important study Black Music in 1968 and The Music Reflections of Jazz and Blues in 1987. Lloyd W. Brown commented in Amiri Baraka that Baraka's essay on music are flawless. As historians, musicological analysts, and as a journalist covering a particular performance, Baraka always commands attention because of his obvious knowledge of the subject and because of his style that is engaging and persuasive even when the sentiments are questionable and controversial. After El Hajj Malik Shabazz, formerly known as Malcolm X, was killed in 1965, Baraka moved to Harlem and founded the Black Arts Repertory Theater. The Black Arts movement helped develop a new aesthetic for Black art, and Baraka was its primary theorist. Black American artists should follow black, not white standards of beauty and value, he maintained, and should stop looking to white culture for validation. The black artist's role, he wrote in Home Social Essays, published in 1966, is to aid in the destruction of America as he knows it. Foremost in this endeavor was the imperative to portray society and its ills faithfully so that the portrayal would move people to take necessary corrective action. He married his second wife, Amina, in 1967. In that same year, Baraka published the poetry collection Black Magic, which chronicles his separation from white culture and values while displaying his mastery of poetic technique. There is no doubt that Baraka's political concerns superseded his just claims to literary excellence, and critics struggled to respond to the political content of the works. Some felt the best art must be apolitical and dismissed Baraka's newer works as a loss to literature. Again, telling us how to act, right? Kenneth Rexworth wrote in With Eye and Ear that Baraka, quote, has succumbed to the temptation to become a professional raceman of the most irresponsible sort. His loss to literature is more serious than any literary casualty of the Second War. Fiddle faddle. In 1966, Baraka moved back to Newark, New Jersey, and a year later changed his name to the Bantuized Muslim appellation Imamu, which means spiritual leader. That was later dropped. Amir became Amiri, which means prince, and Baraka came from Barakat, meaning blessing. In the early 1970s, Baraka was recognized as an influential African American writer. Randall wrote in The Black World that younger black poets, Nikki Giovanni and Haki Madhubuti, were learning from Leroy Jones slash Baraka, a man versed in German philosophy, conscious of literary tradition, who uses the structure of Dante's Divine Comedy in a system of Dante's Hell and the punctuation, spelling, and line divisions of sophisticated contemporary poets. More importantly, Arnold Rampersad wrote in the American Black Review, more than any other black poet, he taught younger black poets of the generation past how to respond poetically to their lived experience rather than to depend on artists on embalmed reputations and outmoded rhetorical strategies derived from a culture often substantially different from their own. After coming to see black nationalism as a destructive form of racism, Baraka denounced it in 1974 and became a third world socialist. He produced a number of Marxist poetry collections and plays in the 1970s that reflected his newly adopted political goals. Critics contended that works like the essays collected in Daggers and Javelins, published in 1984, lacked the emotional power of the works from his black nationalist period. However, Joe Wexelman in Amiri Baraka, The Kaleidoscopic Torch, argued against the tendency to categorize the radical Baraka instead of analyze him. At the very least, dismissing someone with a label does not make for very satisfactory scholarship. Initially, Baraka's reputation as a writer and thinker derived from the recognition of the talents with which he is so obviously endowed. The subsequent assaults on that reputation have too frequently derived from concerns which should be extrinsic to inform criticism. In more recent years, recognition of Baraka's impact on late 20th century American culture has resulted in the publication of several anthologies of his literary oeuvre. The Leroy Jones slash Amiri Baraka Reader in 1999 presents a thorough overview of the writer's development covering the periods from 1957 to 1983. The volume presents Baraka's works from four different periods and emphasizes lesser-known works rather than the author's most famous writings. Transbluacy, the selected poems of Amiri Baraka, 1961 to 1995, published in 1995, was hailed by Daniel L. Guillory in Library Journal as critically important. And Donna Seaman, writing in Booklist, commended that the lyric boldness of this passage collection, Kamal Braithwaite, or Kamal Brathwaite, depending on how you pronounce it, described Baraka's 2004 collection, Somebody Blow Up America, and other poems as one more mark in modern black radical and revolutionary cultural reconstruction. The book contains Baraka's controversial poem of the same name, which he wrote as New Jersey's poet laureate. After the poem's publication, public outcry became so great that the governor of New Jersey took action to abolish the position. Baraka sued though the United States Court of Appeals eventually ruled that state officials were immune from such charges. Of course they are. Baraka's legacy as a major poet of the second half of the 20th century remains matched by his importance as a cultural and political leader. His influence on younger writers has been significant and widespread, and as a leader of the Black arts movement of the 1960s, Baraka did much to define and support Black literature's mission into the next century. His experimental fiction of the 1960s is considered some of the most significant African American fiction since that of Jean Toomer. Jean Toomer, check him out. Writers from other ethnic groups have credited Baraka with opening tightly guarded doors in the white publishing establishment, noted Maurice Kenny in Amiri Baraka, the kaleidoscopic torch, who added, "We'd all still be waiting the invitation from the New Yorker without him. He taught us how to claim it and take it." Baraka was recognized for his work through a PEN/Faulkner Award, a Rockefeller Foundation Award for Drama, and the Langston Hughes Award from City College of New York. He was awarded fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. He died on this day, January 9th, back in 2014. Amiri Baraka. Please hit that button that says subscribe, become a subscriber, and hit the little bell icon next to it so that you could be notified when we put out one of these videos, which should be every day for the rest of the year, and it comes directly to you. Please like and share and drop a comment. Let us know how you're liking this so far. Let us know what you dislike about it. Give us some suggestions or whatever. Okay? But until tomorrow, this is Today in African History with Baba Shaka. Masalam.